So I wanted to share a quick example of how I will wrap up a session and turn it into a set of Claude Code skills. In this case, it's also creating some documentation, which is useful and I think a good practice here as well. Um, so doing some work on the part of my system that allows me to interact with Claude Code through Discord. And without getting into the weeds of how it works, think of it as a tool that allows Discord to post, I'm sorry, that allows Claude Code to post to Discord. Basically, do anything that a user would do, it can do. And in many ways more, because Discord also has some features that users don't get to use, like interactive buttons and stuff like that. And so messages, threads, buttons, and all those things are kind of like building blocks for Claude. And what I wanted to do is take what we built for very specific workflows and say, hey, what you actually built is a bunch of little building blocks, and we built them for one thing in mind, but let's make those building blocks more useful for later. And that's, I think, a really good way of thinking about this. So build things for a specific purpose, and then ask Claude, hey, is there anything more universally useful here? And can we turn it into building blocks? The jargon you might hear programmers use is primitives. I like to think of it as like Legos, or the way IKEA uses like the same hardware to connect different pieces of laminated fiberboard, right? That's kind of what we're looking at. There's like an IKEA element to this. So I asked it, hey, can you review everything we've done in this session, suggest documentation improvement, skills, and what we should make? And so it made some documentation recommendations. And if you aren't technical, some of this might look foreign, and to a degree, that's okay, because I can have it translate it to a level of understanding that works for me. You can have it translate to a level of understanding that works for you. When I don't understand something, I just ask it to explain it as best as I can, as it can, or sometimes I'll even give it a point of reference and I'll say, here's what I do understand. What am I missing? So that's the documentation piece, but then it also recommends some skills. And I said, cool, do the docs, and then let's talk about the Discord bridge skill. That seems useful. And so it went ahead, just did the docs. Docs are done. I'll go read those later. The skill is really what's at. So remember, I said we created these very specific workflows, and I asked it to say, what are the useful building blocks that we could make more universal? And it goes, actually, there's a bunch here. You could send messages programmatically, you can post formatted content, you can do interactive stuff, you can manage threads. Again, basically all the stuff that a user would do, and then some. And then it asks the question, is this a skill that the assistant that Claude is going to use when I ask you to do Discord things? Or is it documentation for when you're building scripts? So is this reference material, or is this the thing that you actually want the assistant to be able to use? And for me, the answer here is, I want the assistant to actually be able to use this. This is not simply documentation. This is actual, like, that building block functionality. And so in this case, I'd say, I think I get the question. So good question. Help me think this through. And I kind of explain, the Discord bridge is currently tied into the thing that we just built, and I want those primitives. And I said maybe a mix of primitives and some usage examples. And the reason I always look for usage examples is because Claude Code loves to know what success looks like. And so if we show it a couple of examples that already work, it can say, oh, you want something like this, but in this other way. Or when we tell it to go, or when it invokes itself, right? It can look at those examples, and it's not looking at a blank page, right? The same way that it's easier for us to come up with new ideas when we see existing ones. Same thing for Claude Code. So it broke it down, and it says, here's what we could do. We'll do a send message primitive, send file, send embed, send with buttons, the typing indicator, some usage patterns that it would enable, and what the skill file would contain. And I'm reading through all this, and I'm going, yeah, that makes sense. I specifically said, hell yeah, now we're talking. And if it didn't make sense, I could ask more questions and say, yeah, like this, but not like that. Or let's start with these. Again, depending on how well I understand the system or how big and robust it is, I might start there, but more commonly I'm like, let's just do one thing. So in this case, let's talk into, before we do this, can you sketch out a workflow diagram? Put it in just for easier reading about how the bridge works. And this is just good for, I have it do this often, especially when we're building skills around interconnected parts. So in this case, again, it's Claude Code and Discord. So let's open this up and see what we've got. Um, and just like these little throwaway, um, uh, text areas. So it put together this little review. And again, for the business owners, you don't necessarily need this. I think this is useful for education. Again, if this doesn't make sense to you, you could say, explain this more deeply, or create a story scenario is a great one. I love using Claude Code to have it explain things in terms that make sense to me. So if there's things that make sense to you, tell it, I'm a business owner. Explain this to me like I'm a business owner, not a programmer, and it can. And if things don't make sense, you can always refine it. So um, I actually have not looked at this before I pressed recording, but everything in here makes sense. Cool. Cool. Okay. I'm going to say that's good. I'm going to say this looks great, and I love the examples you suggested for this skill. Go ahead and build it. And then what I would generally say is like, uh, you know, use plan mode and ask me any clarifying questions that you might have. So we'll say use plan mode and ask any clarifying questions. Cool. And so what it's going to do is it is going to read through all that stuff, all of our documentation, and it is going to create a new skill folder that's got the skill file in it. That is your markdown file that has the instructions. And then it's also going to create all the little bits of code that it needs in order to, in this case, poke the Discord API the way that we want it to consistently. And so this will probably run for the next 4 or 5 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, is my hunch. And at the end, I'll have a skill. And the cool thing is that means that I can either explicitly mention that skill when I want the Claude Code to do things in Discord, and that can be from inside of a manual thing that I'm doing. It can also be inside my automated workflows that are run on scheduled jobs and things like that. So hopefully this is like a concrete example that makes sense. It is a little more on the technical side of things, and like I said, I want to give people examples that are not that. And so for the business folks specifically, if there's anything here that you're like, you lost me completely, please ask. I want to try and break it down, and we'll see if maybe Claude can help us do that too.